This is Dr. James VOND speaking, otherwise Von Dutch in full. And today's date is Wednesday, 10th of December 2025, and it's also United Nations Human Rights Day today. And in my previous video, I mentioned quite a few facts about the atrocities the Coventry courts have done with me, the atrocities that they've caused, and ruining my life in particular. And that's all of the courts here, starting off with the Coventry Magistrates Courts, Coventry Family Courts, Coventry County Court, and also Coventry Crown Court. They've all been responsible in ruining my life, and I've mentioned that in my previous videos. And also I mentioned the case that initially what was disturbing was the background noise from the covert surveillance that was taking place around 2000 and maybe a bit earlier, around 1998 onwards. And obviously, I mentioned who it could have been that's causing that. Obviously, military or police could have that technology, that stealth technology, to bug people literally in their homes, in their private homes. And I was obviously just living at my mother's house, a council house. That's all I was doing on Vine Street, and that background noise was turned on, just constantly, knowingly remind people that they're watching you under covert surveillance secretly through stealth methods. And it's still going on today, even to this day. It hasn't stopped. And these clandestine operations, and I mentioned, like, for instance, it could be MI5, if not MI5, special branch, that's what they call themselves, anti-terrorist or special branch, part of the police organizations. And if not them, obviously with the NHS officials as well, who also monitor as well. And so I gave some clues there. Who could be behind that? Which organisation? It might be a combination of all of them actually. And they do have regular meetings. These officials with the council, of course, and even they could be involved as well. The council, the social services, etc. They all are linked, and they do have meetings, obviously, and feedback regarding reports, surveillance reports, etc. Ongoing on surveillance reports, and this has been going on for decades now. Obviously, I mentioned it since at least 2000 onwards, since 5th of December onwards, I'd say, from 2000. So that's well over 25 years, a quarter of a century that I can recall. That background noise, anyway. It might have been going on before that, obviously, as well, but without the background noise speakers, as they call them, constantly reminding people through the airwaves, obviously, that they're here and watching you, monitoring you, and that's what's been going on, and that's what's been very annoying to many people. And like I said, it caused me to put paint on the graffiti on the walls on Vauxhall Brandish wall. That's how annoying it was, obviously, to me personally. I'm not sure how it affected others, and maybe the neighbours weren't into that. Obviously, they did mention it was military, something like that was going on, military clandestine operations. So we're civilians anyway, and I'm a civilian, obviously. I've always been a civilian, and obviously I'm not accustomed to that sort of behaviour, and I didn't really tolerate it, and I don't think it should be tolerated. It does have psychological effects, and initially, obviously, when the noise was turned on, constantly to remind people that they're there, invading people's privacy. And today is United Nations Day, and that's obviously a fundamental human right. If they're invading your privacy, then that's your space, isn't it? That's that they're invading whatever you do in your private life, in your home, if you've got a home or whatever, a place of abode, and whatever reasons. And you might not be doing anything, that's kind of a illegal or something. It's just normal, carrying out normal duties, normal day-to-day living, just surviving or something, and they're doing that to you. And it's so bad in some cases that it did result in deaths initially. Like I mentioned, Ronald Newman, I'm suspecting somebody like that was bugged, and he even went to the extent of investigating, climbing up to the roof, and unfortunately the poor chap fell and died. And that's the end of his ventriloquist act, obviously. That's obviously just one example, but some people are in the corner doing things in their room, and they're laughing about it, making jokes. things like scallop batch and things like that in the mic, and chicken and chips, that sort of things that they were saying through the background noise. You could hear the operatives speaking on the mic, mentioning things like that, ridiculous things, nothing of usefulness or of substance to help people. Obviously, they're not there to protect people. They're just doing it for whatever reason is, monitoring, obviously, and invading people's privacy. They're getting paid to do that, obviously, to monitor people like that, and on the mic sometimes as well. Ridiculous statements on the mic, and they do get carried away quite severely in many cases. Sometimes when they see that individuals are on their own or something, and they do get quite chatty on the mic. In many cases, especially people who are living on their own, and ridiculous things they come up with. Nothing of use. They're not an alarm or something. You could always fit a security alarm if you think they're there to protect you, to serve and protect. I don't think it's necessarily that. They're invading your privacy, and that's obviously one of your fundamental human rights that's been violated. And they've been doing that for a quarter of a century now. And like I said, the psychological effects are like something like the Stockholm syndrome. If not the Stockholm syndrome, there's the London syndrome as well. I think instead of having apathy and appeasement, the hostages towards the kidnappers, there's a psychological effect. I think maybe the Lima effect in Peru. Japanese people were in the embassy were also kind of kidnapped there, and it's either one of those, either the London effect or the Lima effect. I think it might be the Lima effect, where the hostages were really angry, extremely angry with the kidnappers, and took it out on them, and initially, and had a go at them, and why they're doing that to them, and things like that, and they reacted like that. And I think that's what it's probably more like, rather than appeasement necessarily. Although later on it became kind of like a Stockholm syndrome psychological effect, where they have appeasement with the background noise, the operatives on the mic, maybe. In some cases, they're feeling, almost like the TV or radio show hosts. I mean, they're not obviously radio show hosts. They could always get a job as on a radio show if they want to be kind of something, chatty, but they're not that either. They're obviously military or police, and on the mic and chatting away in many cases, and ridiculous statements of no use, of no importance to anyone, informative or otherwise. And they've been getting away with this scot free, and whoever's authorised it is obviously government and local government. If it's not local government, obviously national government most likely. And like I said, there have been instances where in countries like Australia and California, places like that, they were burning houses. And I can only assume it's something to do with the background noise that was going on. Maybe they were under surveillance as well. Maybe this was going on throughout the world, not just in the UK, in the West Midlands area of England, UK. That's where I'm currently residing, in Coventry, of course. That's in the Midlands. So whoever's authorised that, and like I mentioned, those sort of people, who could do that in an NHS special branch, anti-terrorist, MI5, etc. Only those sort of people have got that technology to, covertly with stealth, bug people like that. And you're literally animals. You've not really got human rights at all, in my opinion. You're living in a zoo. It's almost equivalent to living in a zoo. You're zoo animals end of the day, and you're like guinea pigs to them. You're under that sort of observation, and that's what you are literally. You've got no rights, and they even had an animal system, the NHS, incidentally. I think that replicates what they are. Obviously, that explains everything. We're animals. We're treated like animals, not like humans, because the humans won't be under that sort of scrutiny. Put it that way. They would have their privacy for starters, and they've destroyed people's private lives. And I know that not everyone's going to be a Fred West or something like that, mass murderers, necrophiles, etc. But I don't think they really detect those sort of people anyway. They get away without them, even if they're monitoring. I think a lot of things do happen, a lot of fatalities and things. They're not going to necessarily stop that, and I think it's just ridiculous behaviour, and that they're paying them obviously monitoring staff, of course, and end of the day they're just following orders, and that's all they do. And obviously they're destroying people's lives, and in some cases they've killed people, obviously, like I mentioned, like Rod, for instance, Rod and Amy, the ventriloquist. that's just one example, but others that might have, really made them insane or something. And me, I was basically that annoyed. I put graffiti on the walls, "Spy pigs out" in big letters, and obviously one of the neighbours seen that and brought his dog out as well, and he didn't fancy that me taking vigilante sort of reaction to that. But they weren't doing anything anyway. They weren't stopping that sort of background noise. They weren't going against it. They had a war on terror as well, and they used those draconian rules, to justify it as well. So it happened around that time, 2000 onwards. But I would say 1998 onwards. That's when it was going on. I could hear the ambient background noise. They're constantly reminding you that they're there, and the clandestine methods and means. And someone's authorised that. Obviously, if it's not the superintendent of the local police station, is most likely through government means, the Home Office, etc. People like that, they do that authorization, you see, and they've got the powers to do that. And nowadays, obviously, it could have been a national thing that's going on, mass surveillance, but it hasn't stopped. No one's sued them, or litigation wise, no one's taken any action against them. And they really are kind of voyeurs, end of the day, perverts in some cases, and much more than Cleveland. When they had Cleveland abuse, I think that they're worse than that. They're definitely voyeurs in some cases. They're doing it for a living, so obviously they're getting paid for it, monitoring like that, and then obviously the council is probably involved as well. Therefore, social services, etc. Links with the NHS officials, and obviously they do detect certain things anyway when the people are under observation like that. Obviously, you are treated like animals, ain't you? Zoo animals. So that's what it is like currently anyway, and that's why I'm making this video. So really, maybe it's not really a UN Human Rights Day. Maybe it's just an Animal Rights Day. I think the way they behave, obviously these authoritarian dictats, and the Coventry courts in particular have ruined my life. I've got to mention that, and I've had no family life here properly at all. I couldn't even father my own kids here, raise my own kids, and even if I graduated from Warwick University, after even after resits, they couldn't do anything for me. They were against my rights as fundamental human rights. They violated my human rights and my privacy as well. They're doing it even to this day. So I want the whole world to know what they're doing. And I'm more than that. That guy in Russia, what's his name? That physicist who's monitored constantly by the KGB. I'm much more worse than that. Whoever's doing this to me, they're watching me A to Z. Just I've got no freedoms at all, and I'm making videos, of course. That's where I want people to watch me on my videos, not secretly like that. I mean, that's just perverse behavior, voyeurism to the extreme, and maybe it's the case of a fixation on people, when they really are onto someone like that, and so it's kind of an obsessive behavior. Sometimes they get obsessed with a person, a character, or something, and to all extents like this, when they're monitoring someone like me, for instance, and they enjoy it. Obviously, they thrive on it. There's a psychological effect there. And at the end of the day, I've mentioned those syndromes like the Stockholm syndrome and the Lima syndrome, and also the London syndrome, because you are effectively hostages when with these people around you, watching you like almost like a zoo animal. That's what you are at the end of the day up here. So. What can people do, with that stealth technology going on, and even if I'm a physicist, do they want me to be a counter surveillance expert? I don't think I've got the resources to be a counter surveillance expert here, and I wouldn't be able to, single handedly take on the whole government, would I? The machinery of the government. It's impossible, of course, for one man to do that. That's how ridiculous it is, and if it's like I said, military and police doing that to you, you've got no chance. So as a civilian, they're violating my human rights, and they might be doing that to others out there as well. So if you're watching, just remember, my words and what I've said today, and that does remind me of tyrannical regimes, and if they're invading people's privacy like that and making you live like zoo animals, almost guinea pigs, and that's what you are under that much observation and scrutiny. He's got a clipper, he's got this and that, and they're spitting things out through the airwaves. That's how ridiculous they are. So they are dictators, end of the day, totalitarian regimes.